Hey everyone, welcome. Really glad you're here. I'm Dave Parks. I'm Director of Product Marketing at BillingPlatform. And today I want to dig into something that I think a lot of you are either dealing with right now or are about to. What actually happens to your billing infrastructure when you go usage based? So that's what today is about. We're calling this series Built to Bill. And this first session is specifically about the technical side of usage-based pricing. Not the go-to-market side, not the packaging strategy, but the actual infrastructure question. What has to work at a systems level for usage-based billing to hold up in production? Before I jump in, a couple of quick housekeeping things. We're recording today, so if you can't stay for the whole thing, you'll get the recording. We have about 30 minutes together, and I've left the last 10 or so for Q&A. So start dropping questions in the chat now or at any point during the session, and I'll get to as many as I can at the end. All right, let's get into it. Here's what we're covering today. We'll start with what I think of as the gap, the thing nobody really explains when companies move to usage-based pricing. Then we'll walk through what I'm calling the 5-layer billing stack, the actual components that have to work together for usage-based billing to not fall apart on you. Then we'll take a look at a product demo, and we'll close with a practical diagnostic, 5 questions you can actually take back to your team this week. Okay, so let me start with a scenario. And I want to be clear, this isn't a real company. I'm not going to name anyone. But this is a pattern I've seen enough times that it might as well be a template. Imagine a mid-size B2B SaaS company. They've built a solid product. They've been selling on flat rate pricing, the classic tiers, starter, professional, enterprise. And for a while that worked fine. But then their customers started asking for something different. They didn't want to pay for seats they weren't using. They wanted to pay for outcomes, API calls, data processed, transactions run, whatever the unit of value was for that product. And the company realized this is actually a better model. It aligns us with the customer. It lowers the barrier to entry. Sales loved it. So they launched it. And 6 months later, they had a problem. Not a product problem, not a sales problem, a billing problem. Their invoices were wrong. Not dramatically wrong, like not wrong enough that customers immediately called them out on it, but wrong enough that when customers did question a charge, the finance team couldn't explain it. They couldn't pull up the usage data, match it to the invoice, and say, here's exactly how we got to this number. They'd have to go dig through spreadsheets, cross-reference logs, and in more than a few cases, just issue a credit because it was easier than explaining the calculation. Their engineering team had basically become billing support. Every mid-month upgrade, every customer who wanted to change their plan, every dispute, it turned into a ticket. And the ticket turned into a developer task. Now here's the thing. This company had actually done their homework on the pricing side. They'd thought through their packaging, their unit economics, their go-to-market motion. What they hadn't done, what almost nobody does, is think through what their billing system actually needs to be able to do to support that pricing. And that's the gap. It's the gap between how you price your product and what your billing infrastructure can actually handle. So what does a billing system actually need to handle usage-based pricing? That's what the rest of today is about. And before I dive in, if you're already seeing something like this in your own environment, drop it in the chat. I'd love to know what's resonating. And keep your questions coming. I'll get to them at the end. So I'm going to walk you through what I think of as the 5-layer billing stack. These are the 5 components, the 5 functional layers that have to work together for usage-based billing to work at all. And here's the reason I like this framework. Each layer has a specific job. and each layer has a specific way it fails. So instead of just telling you usage-based billing is complicated, I can be a lot more specific. I can tell you where the complexity lives and what breaks when that layer isn't built right. The 5 layers are event capture, mediation, the rating engine, amendment handling, and your audit trail. Let's take them one at a time. Layer 1 is event capture, or what we commonly know as metering. The job here is simple. Every billable action that happens in your system needs to be recorded. An API call, a transaction, a data query, a user session. Whatever your unit of consumption is, that event needs to be captured, time-stamped, and stored somewhere your billing system can reach it. Sounds basic, and in a flat rate world, it kind of is. You're not really metering anything, you're just tracking seats or contracts. But in usage-based billing, this is your foundation. And if it's shaky, everything built on top of it is shaky too. Here's where it breaks. The 2 most common failure modes at layer 1 are late events and duplicate events. Late events happen when there's a lag between when something occurs in your system and when it shows up in billing. If you're running a batch process that syncs events every 24 hours, you've already got a problem, because by the time billing sees it, the invoice period might have closed. Now you've got revenue that falls in the wrong period or drops out entirely. Duplicate events are exactly what they sound like. The same event gets recorded twice, maybe from a retry mechanism, maybe from 2 systems both trying to capture the same action. If your system doesn't deduplicate, you bill for it twice, and good luck explaining that to a customer. The diagnostic question for layer 1 is this: how long does it take for a usage event to reach billing, and what happens if it arrives more than once? If you don't know the answer to that, or if the answer involves a manual process, that's worth noting. Layer 2 is mediation. This one doesn't get talked about as much, but I'd argue it's where a lot of the hidden complexity lives. Mediation is the layer that takes raw events, which are coming from potentially multiple different source systems in potentially different formats, and normalizes them into something the rating engine can actually use. Think about what a typical product environment looks like. You might have events coming from your core application, from a third-party API provider, from infrastructure logs, maybe from a partner integration. None of those sources are going to format their data the same way. The timestamps might be in different time zones. The event types might use different naming conventions. Some events might be missing fields entirely. The mediation layer's job is to sort all that out before it gets to rating. Where does it break? The most common failure mode is what I'd call silent data loss. An event comes in malformed, missing a customer ID, or with a field that doesn't match the expected schema. And instead of triggering an alert, it just gets dropped silently. No error message, no flag, no one knows it happened. The revenue just doesn't show up. The other failure mode is reconciliation lag. If your mediation process is running nightly batch jobs instead of processing in real time or near real time, you're creating a gap between when things happen and when they show up in billing. And that gap creates problems downstream. The diagnostic question for layer 2: what happens when an event arrives with a missing or invalid field? Does someone get alerted, or does it disappear? Layer 3, the rating engine. This is the heart of the whole thing. The rating engine's job is to take a normalized usage event and figure out what it costs. That sounds simple. It is not simple. In a flat rate world, pricing is basically, here's the monthly contract amount, divide by 30, bill it. The rating is trivial. In a usage-based world, you might have tiered pricing where the per unit cost changes based on volume, overage rates that kick in after a threshold, committed minimums, blended rates across multiple usage types, time of day pricing, customer-specific negotiated rates. And here's the thing, these pricing models aren't static. They change. Customers renegotiate. You run promotions. You launch new products. Every time your pricing changes, your rating engine has to be able to reflect that. So the question isn't just, can your system calculate a usage-based charge? The question is, can it calculate any usage-based charge, and can it be updated without writing new code? That's the failure mode for layer 3. When pricing logic lives in custom code, when every new pricing model means a developer has to write a new function, test it, deploy it, your time to market on pricing changes is your engineering sprint cycle, which is, 3 weeks if you're lucky. And that's a competitive disadvantage. I've talked to finance leaders who discovered that their engineering team had 3 separate rating calculators running in production, written by 3 different developers at 3 different points in time, none of which were giving exactly the same answer for the same input. That's not a bug. That's what happens when your rating logic isn't centralized and configurable. Diagnostic question for layer 3. How does your team update a pricing model, and how long does it take? Layer 4, amendment handling, or what I sometimes call split period handling. This is the layer that deals with change, mid-period upgrades, downgrades, cancellations, backdated corrections. In a subscription model, mid-period changes are annoying but manageable. Someone upgrades on the 15th, you prorate the difference. It's a bit of arithmetic. Most billing systems handle it. In a usage-based model, this gets significantly more complicated because you're not just prorating a flat charge, you're potentially re-rating actual usage events that already occurred under a different pricing model than the one currently in effect. Let me give you an example. A customer is on tier A pricing. They use 500 units in the first half of the month. On the 15th, they upgrade to tier B, which has different per unit rates and different volume thresholds. Now what? Do the first 500 units get re-rated under the new pricing? Do they stay at the old rate? What does the contract say? And does your billing system know how to handle either answer? Most systems don't. What actually happens is someone downloads a data export, opens a spreadsheet, and does it manually. And that manual process is a source of errors. And those errors show up as billing disputes. And those disputes end up in your customer success team's queue. And eventually, the easiest answer is just to issue a credit. Diagnostic question for layer 4. When a customer changes their plan mid-month, what actually happens to the usage that already occurred? And layer 5, the audit trail. This one is a little different from the others. It's less about processing and more about visibility. Can you, at any point, look at any line on any invoice and reconstruct exactly how it was calculated? I want to be clear about why this matters. There are actually 3 different stakeholders who need this. First, your customers. If a customer disputes a charge, and with usage-based billing they will, you need to be able to show them the exact events that generated that charge, with timestamps, quantities, and the pricing rule that was applied. If you can't do that in under a few minutes, you're going to lose the dispute even when you're right. Second, your auditors. If you're subject to ASC 606 or IFRS 15, your revenue recognition process needs to be traceable back to the underlying transaction data. We think this is right is not a control. And third, honestly, just your own team. Month-end close should not involve anyone saying, "We always find surprises in the billing data." That's a layer 5 problem. The failure mode here is fragmentation. The event data lives in one system, the rating calculation lives in another, the invoice lives in a third. Nobody has a unified view. Diagnostic question for layer 5. If a customer called you right now and asked you to explain line 3 of their most recent invoice, how long would it take you to answer? If the answer is more than a few minutes, that's your answer. So those are the 5 layers. Let me just pull them together for a second before we go to the demo. Event capture, mediation, rating, amendments, audit trail. Each one has a job. Each one has a way it breaks. And they're all connected. A problem at layer 1 shows up as bad data at layer 3, and a wrong invoice at layer 5. The companies that get this right, the ones that can launch a new pricing model in a day, handle mid-period changes without involving engineering, and close the books with confidence, they've built or bought something that handles all 5. Not patchwork, not spreadsheets filling the gaps, all 5 in a connected system. And that's actually what I want to show you in the demo coming up. Before I hand off to the demo, let me just set it up so you know what to watch for. We're going to walk through a scenario. A company that sells a platform with usage-based pricing, API calls plus a tiered data processing fee. It's a realistic, multi-component pricing structure, not a trivial case. Here's what I want you to watch for. First, how is a new pricing model configured? You're not going to see anyone write code. You're going to see a configuration interface. Second, watch what happens when a customer upgrades mid-month. Pay attention to how the system handles the split period automatically. And third, at the end, we're going to pull up the audit view on a specific invoice line. I want you to see exactly how traceable this is. The question I want you to be asking as you watch, how would my current system handle this? And keep your questions coming in the chat. I'm seeing them come in already, and I'll get to a bunch of them after the demo.
This is the rate plan configuration. This is where you define what you charge for and how you charge it. We're going to build a professional plan that you'll see in action in a moment. It has 2 components, API calls with a tiered rate and a data processing fee with included units. Create a new rate plan. Name it Professional. The first component is API calls. Set it up as a tiered rate so the per unit price drops as volume increases. Set the pricing start date. Then build 3 tiers. 1 cent per call for the first 200,000, dropping to 7/10 of a cent for the next 300,000, and 5/10 above 500,000. This rewards high-volume customers without any custom negotiation logic in the code. The system automatically applies the rate based on the tier. The second component is data processing. The first 100 gigabytes are included in the plan, and anything beyond that is charged at the overage rate. Set it to $1.50. Now you have 2 components, each with a different pricing structure, all in the same rate plan. Next, add the monthly recurring fee at $1,200 and include those 100 gigabytes of data processing. This is where you link the usage product, data processing, and include the first 100 for free. Override the pricing and set it to $1,200. Then save it. No SQL, no developer, no sprint. That pricing model is live and ready to assign to customers. Here's a customer example. This is customer A on the standard plan. Check out their current invoice to see where things stand. It's day 15 of the month. They've logged 85,000 API calls and used about 20 gigabytes of data. They want to upgrade to the professional plan starting today. Normally, this is where billing gets complicated. You'd have to close out the current period, manually prorate, maybe file a developer ticket. Let's see what happens instead. Go back to the customer and make the change. Cancel the standard package, then set up the professional package to start today. Now head back to the invoice to see what changed. Refresh, and you'll see a prorated cost for the recurring fee on the upgrade. Period 1 shows a total of $250. Period 2 is $600. No manual setup, no formulas. The system automatically handles mid-month plan changes by splitting the usage and prorating the recurring fee. That's built in. Let's skip ahead a few days. Now there are new usage charges on the invoice for the professional plan covering the second half of the month. Refresh the invoice and those charges appear. Now the split is clear. Period 1, days 1 through 15, is all on the standard plan. That's 85,000 API calls. At 1.2 cents per thousand, that's $1,020. Data processing is 20 gigabytes, which is under the 25 included, so $0. The recurring fee is $250 because it's prorated. Period 2, days 16 through 30, is on the professional plan. You've got 145,000 API calls at 1 cent per thousand, so $1,450. Data processing is 38 gigabytes, still under the 100 included, so $0. If you want more detail, open the invoice breakdown and you can see exactly where the recurring fee was split. You'll see June 1st through June 15th, and then the second half. There it is, all correct, all automatic, and easy to explain to a customer. Last thing to show you. Say a customer calls in and asks about a charge on their invoice. With usage-based billing, that happens. This is customer B. They're on the professional plan, and their end-of-month invoice just came in. Look at the API call line. This is the one that crossed a tier boundary. 287,500 API calls for the month. Here's the tier breakdown. The first 200,000 calls are billed at 1 cent per call. That's $2,000. The next 87,500 calls move into Tier 2 at 7/10 of a cent per call. That comes out to $612.50. Now look at the data processing line. Total usage is 127 gigabytes. The first 100 are included in the plan, so there are 27 gigabytes over, billed at $1.50 per gigabyte. That's $40.50. If you want to go deeper, you can see every individual event. Here's an example of one API call event. Each event is timestamped, shows the quantity, and shows the rate applied. Every event has a timestamp, applied rate, quantity, and a total. So when a customer calls and says they don't understand a charge, you're not digging through spreadsheets. You don't have to say, "Let me get back to you." You just pull this up, walk them through it, and you're done in under 2 minutes. You can even show exactly where the rate comes from. It's right there in the professional package. You can see the tier structure right here, so it's easy to explain, and everything is timestamped, version locked, and immutable. So that's 3 things: a pricing model configured without code, a mid-month upgrade handled automatically, and an invoice that's fully traceable to the event level. All 5 layers, working together in BillingPlatform.
Okay, so that's what it looks like. The thing I want to underscore coming out of the demo is what you didn't see. No code was written. No developer was involved. No sprint was required to set up that pricing model or handle that mid-period upgrade. That's what I mean when I say configuration, not engineering. Every one of those 5 layers we talked about, event capture, mediation, rating, amendments, audit trail, they're all being handled by the system. Your team defines the rules, the system executes them. That's the shift. And it's not a small one. Okay, so if you only take one thing out of today, I'd rather it be something actionable. So let me give you 5 questions, one per layer, that you can actually take back to your team this week. Layer 1. How long does it take for a usage event to reach billing, and what happens if it arrives more than once? Layer 2. What happens when an event arrives with a missing or invalid field? Who finds out? Layer 3. If we needed to change a pricing tier or add an overage rate tomorrow, who does that and how long does it take? Layer 4. When a customer changes their plan mid-month, what actually happens to the usage that already occurred? And layer 5. If a customer called right now and disputed a charge, How long would it take us to explain the calculation? Those 5 questions will tell you a lot about where your stack is solid and where it's not. And honestly, if you want to turn those questions into a structured evaluation, we've put together a diagnostic framework. Reach out to us at BillingPlatform and we can walk through it with you. Let me tell you what's coming next, and then we'll jump into Q&A. Episode 2 of Built to Bill is going to be very different from today. Today was foundational, the framework, the layers, the failure modes. Episode 2 is about speed. Specifically, it's about what it looks like when your billing infrastructure moves at the speed of a conversation. We're going to make it interactive. I'm not going to say more than that right now, but you'll want to be there. To register for episode 2, and I'd encourage you to do it now while it's on your mind, the link is in the chat. You can also find it at billingplatform.com/events. And if anything from today's session sparked a conversation you want to have with us directly, whether that's about where your stack has gaps or what a better architecture could look like, again, billingplatform.com. Reach out and someone from our team will get back to you. Okay, let's get to your questions. All right, let's dig into these. I've got a bunch of questions here in the chat, so let me go through them. First one, let me read this. We're still on flat rate pricing, but considering a move to usage-based. What's the first thing we should get right before we launch? Really good question, and honestly, it's the question I wish more companies asked before they launched rather than after. The short answer is layer 1, event capture. Get your metering in place before you change your pricing model. That means identify every billable event in your system, make sure it's being recorded reliably, and make sure you have a deduplication mechanism. Everything else you can iterate on after launch. But if your event capture is broken, you're flying blind from day 1. Okay, next one. How do you handle pricing changes for existing customers when you update your models? Do you have to re-rate historical usage? This is actually one of the trickier questions in the space. And the answer is it depends on your contracts. Typically, pricing changes apply prospectively. New usage is rated at the new price. Historical usage stays at the rate that was in effect when it occurred. But where it gets complicated is grandfathering. If you have customers on older pricing tiers that you've since discontinued. A good rating engine handles this by storing the rate card that was in effect at the time of each event, not just the current rate card. So you can always re-rate, but you're re-rating against the correct historical rates. That's a design requirement a lot of systems miss. Let's see. What's the most common mistake companies make when they move from spreadsheet billing to an automated system? Oh, I have a pretty clear answer on this one. The most common mistake is they automate their existing process rather than redesigning it. So they have a spreadsheet process that has 15 manual steps in it, and they take a billing platform and try to replicate those 15 steps in software. And what they end up with is an automated version of a bad process, which is only marginally better than the manual version. The companies that do this well treat the automation project as an opportunity to rethink the process entirely. Start with, what should the output be, and work backwards from there. Okay, we have usage data in multiple systems, our product, our infrastructure logs, and a third-party provider. Is it realistic to unify all of that in one billing system? Yes, but, and this is important, the unification happens at the mediation layer, not at the source. You're not trying to consolidate your data infrastructure. You're building a mediation layer that can pull from all 3 sources, normalize the events into a common format, and pass them downstream to rating. The key requirement is that your billing system has flexible event ingestion. Ideally, it can accept events via API, file import, and real-time stream, depending on what each source can support. If it can only handle one ingestion format, you're going to be writing adapters forever. One more. How do you think about audit trails in the context of ASC 606? Is this something your billing system should handle, or is that more of a revenue recognition system problem? Both, honestly, but they have different jobs. Your billing system's job is to generate an accurate, traceable record of what was consumed, when, and at what rate. That's the raw material. Your revenue recognition system's job is to take that raw material and apply ASC 606 judgment. When is the performance obligation satisfied? What's the transaction price? How do you handle variable consideration? The problem most companies run into is that the handoff between those two systems is messy. The billing system produces invoices, but not necessarily the event-level detail that RevRec needs. So the answer to your question is, yes, your billing system should maintain the audit trail, and it should expose that data in a format that your RevRec process can actually use. If you're exporting a CSV once a month and manually importing it into another system, that handoff is probably your biggest audit risk. All right, I know we're at time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's schedules. Thank you so much for being here today. This is a topic I could talk about for another 2 hours, so if you have more questions, reach out. Drop us a note at billingplatform.com. Register for episode 2. It's going to be worth your time. See you there.